Hi, my name is Sydney Mitchell.
Hi, I'm Matthew Brickman, Florida Supreme Court mediator. Welcome to the MediateThis podcast, where we discuss everything mediation and conflict resolution. Welcome to January 1, 2021. I wanted to kick off this new year with a special guest. In 2020, Sydney and I began this podcast, and we laid down a lot of foundation, and we discussed how we view conflict, should resolve conflict, and the role we play in relationships. We also discussed how everyone, including myself, prepares for mediation and began discussing the parenting plan. A lot of things worldwide took place in 2020, and it was a difficult year for most. And I recently read that divorce due to the coronavirus is up 34% as times continue to be difficult. And as a mediator and in this podcast, my mission has been and continues to be to empower people who are experiencing fear and chaos to find hope and peace. And today I am so excited to be joined by longtime friend Kim Benedict. I recently became aware of Kim's divorce, and she has an amazing story of empowerment, hope, and peace. And I believe that 2021 can be a year of empowerment, hope, and peace for you, and wanted her to share her story with all of you. So Kim, welcome to the MediateThis podcast.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's sort of start at the end. Like, you've made it through. What are you doing now? And we're going to go back and talk about how you got here, but what are you doing now?
So I am living in North Carolina and currently using all of my experiences as a life coach to help and encourage and empower other people who, are struggling, going through the same things that I've gone through in my life.
So how long have you been doing life coaching?
Well, there's really no time frame because I feel like I've been doing it for a very long time.
Okay.
It's something that I have known that I've always, it's what I'm supposed to be doing. And my life just kind of always directed me in those areas from when, I was married, in church, and with my kids. I was always doing life coaching. So I just recently got certified so that I could actually make it a business. So there's no time frame on my experience.
Yeah. So let's go back and then talk about you had a long-term marriage, and you actually lived in Florida, which is how I know you, because you lived in Florida. And so according to Florida law, you had a long-term marriage, correct?
Correct.
How many years?
27 years we were together total.
Wow. And so together 27 years, married for?
Let's see. I don't know. We got together when we were 17.
Wow.
I was married at 23. We were separated at 44. And then the final divorce came when I was 50.
Okay. So, and how many kids?
3.
3 kids. And when you got divorced, how old were they?
Well, when it's really the divorce to me doesn't. It's when we got separated, because that's when it affected them the most.
Okay,
so when we were separated, they were 13, 16, and 21.
Okay, and you guys were.
But
I was going to say you were separated for how long before the divorce?
8 years. No, 6 years. 6 years.
Okay.
6 years we were separated.
Okay, so how did that all go down? I mean, how were you co-parenting? Were you guys getting along? Were you fighting? Was it toxic? Was it like how was it?
Well, I think it went well. I mean, it could have been toxic. We just were very, very intentional on not allowing that to be in our family, because especially for myself, and I know for my ex as well, that we kind of had the mentality that we were divorcing each other, not our family. So our family and our children were always the priority.
That's really good. That's really good.
Yeah. Because we're going to be a family forever, whether we're together or we're not together.
And I'll tell you, as a mediator, that's refreshing to hear because that is not the mentality that I generally deal with on a daily basis. I generally deal with, I am divorcing you, our family is ripped apart, our in-laws, now we're going to have new friends. Like, they even put their friends in a position where the friends have to choose, are they going to be friends with the husband or friends with the wife, even though they were friends with both? And so, that's really neat.
Well, some of that stuff is just the reality. That's the reality of, breaking that marriage. You do have, you're two separate people, you come together, you're married, and then you create a marriage. You create a life within that marriage. And so it's just a reality that, yes, you're going to have your friends are going to choose. It's just inevitable. But, the reality is whether you're the person who's choosing to leave or somebody else is, your spouse has chosen to leave, everything is an intentional decision. And acceptance is the first key to anything. You may say, I'm going to be intentional, but your spouse isn't being intentional. Well, that's just something that was part of, I think, for me, was the success in it, is that you just choose to be responsible. I can only be responsible for myself, and I'm going to be intentional. And eventually, there's kind of a system in which, to keep from it being toxic, that eventually, when you keep your ground and you are being intentional, it overflows into other areas. The in-laws, the children, the spouse. That's how we found it anyways.
So, who was intentional first, you or him?
Well, I think we were both intentional, but for different reasons. His intention was to save the marriage, and my intention was to be the best divorced parents that we can be. So our intentions were different, but we eventually came together.
Now, eventually, how long does that? I mean, because some people are intentional. Like sometimes I've done a divorce where we're all sitting in the room together and they're holding hands across the table. Like that's intentionality from the beginning. Sometimes they have to get to that place. Sometimes they've got to work through those emotions. For you guys, was it from the beginning, or did it take time? Was it that intentional work? And just like a lot of people would intentionally work on a relationship, you guys, it sounds like you guys were intentional as the relationship was being redefined. So many people look at a divorce as, okay, now it's being destroyed. When actually, for me, so I used to be, people used to say to me, it's like, Matthew, how can you do divorce? You don't even believe in divorce. You're not, it's not like you're an advocate going, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to help people get out, and I'm like, well, I'm not destroying anything. I'm not even helping them destroy. I'm helping them restructure. And I think that's a mindset. I think it's a mindset of I'm helping them restructure the family unit. We're not tearing it apart. We're redefining it. We're restructuring it.
100%.
So with you guys, was it that mindset from the beginning? Did it take some time? I mean, were there negative feelings you guys had to work through? Like, how was that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think even no matter how much you're on the same page and being intentional, you're two separate people going through the same thing from a different aspect. And so, yes, we were intentional from the beginning. Again, we were both intentional going in a different direction, but we always worked together being intentional. And I think that, again, the key thing, the very first key element to it being successful, so to speak, in the redefining is acceptance. And so until we were both on the same page of accepting this is going to happen, which took a while, and not for me, but for my ex, it took a while. But once we were both we accepted that this is what was going to take place, then that intentionality became more parallel.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's reminded me sort of like, people go through AA, and the first thing is you have to admit, I'm an alcoholic. Once you can actually admit your surroundings, who you are, the environment, well, now you can start the healing process.
Correct.
And so you guys sort of went through that. So long-term marriage. I mean, a lot of people are like, wow, long-term marriage, you got 3 kids. Wow. She must have just done so well. She must have gotten lifetime alimony, gotten great child support. After that long, man, there are probably lots of assets, and she probably really made out well in this divorce. Mm-hmm. But you and I have talked, that's not exactly how it went down.
Right.
So how did it go down? What was your mentality going through it? Because, so many people are in it and they just get blinded by fear and the chaos, and they don't have clarity. And usually, I equate it to, that child game, Hungry, Hungry Hippo, where, resources are scarce and people will grab as much as they can because they think that that's all there is. So, what was it with you with a long-term 27-year marriage? Like, what was it for you going through that?
Well, I had, again, going back to that intention, the intention for me was not to, obviously a divorce is going to disrupt your family, but I wanted to do that as little as possible. And so for me, that meant I wanted to save the relationship with my ex as much as I could. So I chose to leave and basically just start over, just trust the process. I did not want money, belongings, items, things that were all replaceable, that didn't really matter, that didn't really have a value. I didn't want those to ever be, a wedge between the relationship I knew that I needed to maintain on some level for my family's purpose. So I just chose to leave and trust that, when something doesn't work out as you planned, it doesn't mean that there isn't something better. Not that, I just wanted to create a life that was new for me and for my family. And I just chose to move forward with that and trust the process.
So you have said trust the process, and it sounds like a great concept. What do you mean by trust the process? Because, in family law, there is a process. Like, we go through the divorce process. You have to go to mediation. You've got to create a parenting plan. You've got to, divide up the assets, the debt. We've got to discuss everything as a process. But when I think, when you're saying trust the process, it may be a little bit different. So when you say trust the process, take us through, like, what does that mean? Trust the process.
Well, let me just start by saying that this was probably it was the first thing in my life that I feel like I truly went from beginning to end, that I pushed through. And trusting the process was a mantra that I had to say over and over and over again, continuously. And what that meant for me, again, there's kind of the key elements to this process for me, which was, again, I say acceptance. We have to accept our reality, right? Because perception is everything. How you choose to see your reality becomes your reality. And so that was the first key. And then the second key was listening to my intuition, listening to that, what feels right, what I know is right. And, for me, that was, okay, I'm not divorcing my family. My family is my priority. Myself is a priority. Being the healthiest person I can be so that I can continue to help my children through this process. And then, part of choosing to trust the process, you have to constantly be checking your motives and intentions. Okay. And so I was constantly doing that in everything that I did. And part of that, another big element, is that you have to live in this place of what's currently happening and big picture. You have to have that simultaneously in every decision that you make. And so when I left, I had never worked. I stayed at home with my children. I was a housewife. So how in the world was I going to leave after, 27 years of not making my own income, and support myself and not take alimony, not take child support? Like, it seems crazy. And I had a lot of people tell me that it was crazy. I even had people say that it was irresponsible. And yeah, maybe it is, but it was something, again, it's that first thing that I've ever done in my life from beginning to end, where I began to trust inside, trust my own intuition, trust who I knew I needed to be, who I wanted to my kids to see me as. A lot of people stay because they feel as though, it's not a good example to your kids. You're seeing your kids are going to see you give up. But, I want my kids to see and emulate and feel empowered as a woman, as a female.
Right.
So anyways, trusting the process was that. I had to just trust that process, that things were going to be okay.
So how did your kids handle the process? Because you mentioned, wanting to set that example for the kids and, wanting to, keep that family intact as much as possible as you're redefining and restructuring it. Because your kids were at a very impressionable age, being teenagers. How did they deal with it, and how are they, post-divorce now? Was there therapies? Was there counseling? Was there how did they do through it? Because, there's the old proverb of, the parent eats the fruit, the child tastes the bitterness. But, it sounds like you were very intentional on which fruit you were going to eat. Are you going to eat healthy fruit? Are you going to eat rotten fruit? So, how did your kids handle your choices and how you and your ex dealt with this?
Well, my son was 21 at the time, and he didn't have much of adjustments. He was out of the house by that time. He was married. My daughters, 13 and 16, that was a different story. They did not handle it well. My middle daughter, she didn't speak to me for 5 months.
Wow.
They were very angry. They blamed me. They clearly saw that their dad didn't want this, and so they didn't understand. Again, this is where I will keep going back to that trust the process. There were times that I questioned myself, am I doing the right thing? Even though deep inside, like intuitively, I knew it's what I needed to do to become the individual that I needed to be for my kids. But when you have your kids lashing out, rebelling, getting in trouble at school, went through sex, drugs, everything, I thought, and I had people in my life saying, are you sure you're making the right decision? Look what you're doing to your family. But I had to trust the process.
Trust the process, yeah.
That what I was doing had a better outcome in the end. And today, 8 years later, that's true. That has come to, that's exactly what's happened.
So you've got, the relationship with your kids now is how?
Great. And I had good relationships with them prior.
Right.
But
they were lashing out and feeling the effects of the restructuring of the family.
Yes, 100%.
And you were, and so you were the one that actually filed. You're the one that filed, wanted out. Your husband wanted to still be married, was having some difficulty accepting the process, as we discussed. And so, I mean, was it, and I'm sure some of the listeners probably want to know without getting too in your face detail graphic, but, I mean, was there abuse? Was there, drugs, alcohol, infidelity, or was it just, look, we've been together forever. We've sort of just drifted apart. How was that?
There was absolutely no abuse. He was a great husband, a great dad, great provider. It was, and this is, this kind of connects to why I'm a life coach and why I use my own story to impact and empower other women, not just women, just humans, right? I know it's this typical thing where people say, oh, I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. But that's a reality for some people. I got together when we were 17.
Yeah.
Like, you grow into different people, and we get together for different reasons. At 17, I chose a relationship much different for the reasons I'm going to choose one today. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, we committed ourselves as much as possible. But in the process of knowing that the relationship was not, I was not fulfilled based on who I had become. It had nothing to do with him per se, or the marriage being abusive or,
yeah, none of that. None of because a lot of people, that I deal with, especially, I'll tell you, 2020 has been one of those years where, everything that they talk about on the news is 100% correct. There's drug abuse, alcohol abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, child neglect. I mean, everything. And so those are all catalysts that people are saying, you know what, enough is enough, and I'm done. But not always. Sometimes, I do hear exactly what you just said is, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. Some people leave. I know for myself, and this sort of piggybacks a little bit on what you were saying is, for me, it finally came to the point where I realized that the example that I was showing my son of how to treat a woman was improper because of the way I treated their mother, and the way that I was showing an example of my daughter of how to find a husband that will treat you a certain way. Well, I was setting a bad example. And I finally said, look, I'd rather set no example than continue setting a bad example. And that was just a really big eye-opening moment for me. And I wish I had understood, I guess, the concept of trust the process, because I guess I sort of went through it without understanding the concept, and having that context, I think, would have been comforting. It would have been helpful. Having somebody like you, which is why I find myself as a mediator. I've gone through this. I've been in court, and people know my story. And so it's not that, hey, you know what, I just chose to be a mediator. I went to school. I got my education. Here I am. I'm here to mediate. It's like, no, I've lived this. I understand it. Just like you as a life coach, you've got so much life experience and wisdom to bring going, look, I went through this. And so trusting the process, I was estranged from my daughter, like you were estranged from your daughter. And we've got those things that we can share, those stories that we can share, so that, people realize that they're not the only one. I mean, so many people feel isolated. I know that people say to me, oh, nobody would ever understand. I'm the only one. I'm like, you are not the first, nor will you ever be the last. But to have the insight and the wisdom to be able to get through that is really good. So let's transition a little bit now to you're a life coach. So how do you take the things that, a lot of people get paralyzed in the fear going through a divorce, or they get paralyzed and and maybe not even a divorce. These, I'm sure this year, job loss, right? Or paralyzed with the loss of a loved one. So, as a life coach, as someone who's trusting the process, whatever process it is, whether it's a divorce process, whether it's a life change process, give some insight and wisdom of how do people trust the process? How do people go through that? What is it that you do to help them as, a life coach, giving them the guidance and inspiration and hope that they need?
Sure. So I'll say, just because I was the one who initiated the divorce, it does not mean that I was not paralyzed by fear in my process. I was. And that's kind of going back to what I said about really probably being the first thing in my life that I truly went from beginning to end pushing through. Because, and just because I wanted to leave, didn't mean that I wasn't sad, didn't mean that, again, that I wasn't fearful. There were times that, I really was like, this is never going to change. Like, my kids are never going to talk to me. I'm going to ruin their lives. My decision is selfish. Like, I took a lot of outside verbiage, and applied that to myself that enhanced my fear. There were times, if I'm honest, there were times just driving and being so overwhelmed, choosing to leave, but feeling the complete loneliness of your kids not speaking to you and blaming you, and driving and just being like, I want to run my car into this brick wall. So I was paralyzed by fear. It was a process that, it was my first time I ever experienced anxiety attacks. Like, the first time I experienced one was after we had a counseling session as a family where we told the kids that, we were going to divorce. It was so horrific for me in that session. Like, we were together as a family. They all thought that we were going to talk about reconcile. To then have to tell them that we weren't, I became an island by myself in that room. And leaving that that session, driving home, was the first time I had an anxiety attack. I had no idea what was going on. My body became numb. My hearing, I had a loss of hearing, and that happened 2 other times. So fear was immobilizing, but, and I think this is where my life coaching and my journey comes in, is that part of trusting the process for me was trusting my intuition that no matter how difficult this is, or how it appears to be just a flippin' mess, okay, that I knew that I knew that I knew that I knew it's what I needed to do to have a better outcome. If then there was one moment that I was like, I just need to go back. When one of my daughters was just spiraling, I considered going back to save her, to help her, to keep her from spiraling. And that's a very difficult decision. It's a very lonely decision.
Right.
To look at that and then go, no, I can't. Like, she's got to work through her process, just like I do, just like he does, just like we all do. And that made me feel like a bad mom sometimes. It made me the judgment from outsiders, church people, friends, strangers. The
court of public opinion can be vicious.
What's that?
The court of public opinion can be vicious.
Yes.
All that outside influence. But you trusted the process. You were still going to push through because you still, as you've said before, you knew that going back was not going to be globally in the end the best choice. Like, it might have put a Band-Aid on the wound, but it was not going to allow the wound to heal, to fully heal and be able to move forward, correct?
Correct. And, I feel like that there was this like system that I followed. Because you have these, all these emotions that are always changing, right? And again, we go back to constantly needing to have mantras and say things to myself in the midst of situations. Okay, this is the reality. This is what I've accepted. What the perception I create is going to be my reality. So I kept a picture, a big picture. What can I do? What do I need to do now, right now in this moment, that reflects acceptance of my reality, which, my reality was that going back was not an option. It was only going forward. And so my reality was needing to go through the mud, the thick of all that.
Right.
And then, again, listening to that intuitive part of me that was like, yes, it looks as though I could go back and would make it better, but it's not. And then within that intuitive place, constantly checking my motives and intentions, no matter what it was. Even if it was something as, I'm not going to post something on social media. That's something we're all involved in, right? We're all doing that all the time, no matter our age. Love to post where we're at, what we're doing. And even in that moment, there were times I would say, what's my motive? And if I post this, it could appear this way and could make him think this if he sees it. Like I was that intentional about everything that I chose to do or not do. And my intention was just to be pure. So the day that I left, and this is still a big piece in my life today, the day that I left, it was a tropical storm. We weren't even supposed to be on the road. I left, turned the corner, from my house, and my car is shaking. The wind is blowing so hard. The rain is going sideways. And I'm sitting in this car, just leaving, left him. And I'm like, what is it that you're feeling? Why are you not crying? What's going on? Car shaking. And out loud, I said, I feel peace and I feel free. That doesn't mean free from him as though he was horrible. Like,
right.
It had nothing to do with that. It was internal. It was me. It's what I needed to do. And in that moment, that has been to this day, 8 years later, it's still how I choose to create my life. My life is created around what is it that I should do, or I can and cannot do, that is creating peace and freedom in my life. And that starts with your motives and intentions in everything that you do. And, with that, then you make the choice. Every choice is, I'm going to make the next best choice. Not the right, for me, it wasn't the next right choice, because the right choice is going to look different for different people.
Right.
Me leaving my spouse was not the right choice for my, in my church circle. It wasn't, but it was the right choice. So I kind of changed it for myself, where I'm going to just, in trusting the process, meant I'm just going to check my motives, be pure, do the next best thing. Then within that, I can set boundaries. And boundaries are key to, any sort of, breakup, divorce.
There's so much freedom. There's so much freedom in boundaries. People think that, oh my gosh, boundaries are restrictive, but they create so much freedom.
Peace. Those are the two words, right?
Yeah.
Freedom and peace. And the boundaries actually create that. And those three things, your motives and the next best thing and your boundaries, those are like a circle that just keep, it's the wheel that just keeps spinning. They all have to go together.
Okay, so say that again. So it's boundaries,
It's your motives and
Okay,
intentions.
first your motives and intentions, then next
Is choosing the next best thing.
choose the next best thing, and then boundaries.
This is why it's systematic, right? Because you cannot make the next best choice if you're not aware and intentional in making pure and motives coming from your pure motives and intentions. You can't do the next best thing because then you're manipulating. You're going to be manipulating something.
Right.
So it's the motive intention is pure to do the next best thing. Then when you're in that place, you can set boundaries, and the boundaries will come easier. It's not easy to set boundaries.
Sure. It's sometimes sometimes the most difficult thing ever is to say no.
Yeah.
Man. So this, I've always been amazed by you. I mean, going way back, way back. But what I hear you say now, which is just so amazing, is that when you keep talking intentionality, you're talking from a place of logic and reason and the mind, not emotion. Is that right?
100% right.
Yeah, I thought so. I'm like, Kim is just like regiment. Like, Kim thinks like a man. You know, I mean, you did not approach this, like, you're not letting, and it's interesting because in mediation, you know, like, we are human beings. And so many times, like, lawyers will say, look, you know, just stop being emotional. We just have to have a logical conversation. And I'm like, no, hold on. We are human beings, which is logic and emotion. And we can't just turn off emotion, especially when in a difficult place. But what I tell them is I give them this picture. I say, look, think of you as a stove. Okay, you've got a front burner, you've got a back burner. Don't take your emotions off the stove. You can't do that. But they need to go on the back burner. You need to let logic and reason drive this train, but you can't get emotion out of it. Just like you said, going through it, trusting the process, you were still upset. You were still fearful. Like, you know, you couldn't say, Kim, just don't be afraid. Like, that's not possible, right? But everything that you keep talking about with the intentionality, you really, like, took your emotions, put them on the back burner, took your logic and reason, which was looking at the here and now and the global picture, and you let, you know, trusting that process, said, my mind and my heart are both going to make it through. But you had to lead with your mind, because your heart, you'd wake up today, you feel bad, you go back to the relationship. Tomorrow you wake up in the relationship going, oh my gosh, that was a mistake. You get out of the relationship. But going with the mind, trusting the process, you're able to then stay focused, right?
100%. Because there was,
Wow.
I mean, trust me, there were times that I was extremely emotional. Like, I am definitely wired to be more logical than emotional, but I was extremely emotional through the process.
Yeah.
But that goes back to those key elements of motives first, and you have to be intentional with yourself and honest with yourself.
Right.
You know, if you're really going to work through that process of being intentional and pure, then you have to be honest with yourself. And so one of the, you know, like, key things for me that I learned during that process was I don't always have to respond in the moment. Just because somebody asks me a question, you know, just because he would ask me a question or call me didn't mean I needed to take the call or have the conversation or give an answer to, you know, a decision that needed to be made. And so that was part of the intentionality too, that helped me keep the emotion in check. I still was, you know, I would react and be emotional about something, but take that time to go, you know what? I don't know the answer right now. I'm going to have to get back to you.
Yeah.
Or setting those boundaries, the boundaries which kept me peaceful and gave me freedom was, you know, whatever it would look like. You know, when you call me, I'm not going to answer the phone. You're going to have to leave a message, leave a very specific message so I know exactly what we're going to be discussing when I call you back. Like, it was strategic. I became strategic to allow myself to operate more in the logic than the emotion. But I was definitely emotional.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people think that setting boundaries, and I think you just alluded to this a little bit, is a lot of people think that setting boundaries would be like, okay, you're going to set a boundary with him. But it sounds like, and I've learned myself is so many boundaries get set first with self. I'm not going to put myself in the situation where I could be reactive and then be emotional. I am going to set a boundary on myself that says, I am not going to answer this phone call right now because I don't want to emotionally approach this. I want to logically approach this, and I want to be able to respond instead of react to that. And so many people think, well, I just need to set boundaries on everybody else, where really you start with your own self-boundaries, self-preservation, which sounds like what you're talking about, correct? Where you're setting them on yourself going, I don't need to take this phone call right now. Well, that's a self-boundary. That's not an external boundary.
Sure. Well, and I think that goes along with just a life truth, which is I can only control myself. I can't control somebody else.
Okay.
I couldn't, how he's operating when he has the kids or how he's operating towards me or with me, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. I am only in control of myself. And if I wanted to be the healthiest version of myself, which again, let's go back to perception is everything and the acceptance piece. This is, whether you're leaving or somebody else left, it's still the same. Okay. Let's just say that he wanted to leave and I'm left. I did not want the divorce to happen. I still needed to accept that. Right. And so within that, when you accept your reality becomes, your perception becomes your reality. And so I just, sorry, I lost my train of thought. The boundary, what were we talking about? Sorry.
You were talking about him and setting the boundaries and.
Yeah. I don't know where I was going with it, except.
Well, so.
The reality, I know what it was. It was that you're only responsible for yourself, period. Yeah. And that, whether it's in the context of your separation or but it doesn't matter. That's just reality in life in general.
Yeah.
And when you get to that place where you're just like, okay, I don't know how he's going to react or what he's doing or what he's saying. This is my boundary for me. And in a world, especially the Christian world, we're kind of influenced to say taking care of ourselves is not godly. It's selfish. We're supposed to be laying ourselves down. We're supposed to be serving others. And I agree with that. There's a time and a place for that. It's okay to make yourself a priority. And that's an adjustment too. That's something that you learn to do. And, when you're getting divorced, if that's your reality, then just accept it and then create who you want to be. I don't know enough.
Yeah. Well, and Kim, a lot of times, and actually recently I've had a number of mediations where, and it is the moms, and where they are so concerned about the children and what's going to happen in that other home, that they lose themselves trying to control what the father, their ex, is going to do in their home. And it's not that they have different parenting styles. Not abuse, not neglect, different parenting styles, but they try to control that. And I think that what happens is they lose a lot of who they are as they're trying to control the other person.
Yeah. It doesn't work.
And it just doesn't work. So to finish this up, got a couple more minutes left. How how's life now with you, the ex, the kids? Like, you said that this is the first thing in your life that you have seen through completion, like start to finish. But I know that there is no finish line because you still have your kids. Both of you are still alive. So it's not technically finished. It's not like, well, he's dead, so I'm done. You know, so like, how does life, like, you went through this process 8 years ago, you know, trusted the process, had your ups and downs, your emotions, set your boundaries with him, with you, with the kids, with family, have found what you were created to do now, empowering others. How's life now? Like, do you guys get along? Do you guys talk? How's the relationship with the kids? Do you guys do holidays together? Like, what's life like?
All of it. We do all of it.
Wow, really?
We do all of it. Yeah, we're friends. I have great relationships with the kids. Being that I'm in North Carolina, when I go back to Florida, I stay at my ex's house.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
You actually stay at his house?
Actually stay at his house. And he has a girlfriend.
I was going to say, is he remarried or has a girlfriend?
And he has a girlfriend. And I love her. She's amazing.
Really? Wow, yeah, that's incredible.
You know, and I think that a lot of that, it's just who we both are. But that really came from the intentionality that we both, you know, put forth.
Yeah.
And the boundaries. Like, I really don't believe that we would be able to be where we are today if we did not adhere to boundaries.
Yeah.
You know, and
did you guys ever sit down and consciously set up boundaries? Did you guys talk about boundaries, or were these boundaries that you really imposed and then it sort of dribbled over? You know, I mean,
I don't want to say that like I was the only one setting boundaries. I mean, I don't know what his boundaries were with me.
Yeah, yeah.
But I know
without bringing him into the conversation, going, "Hey, Gary, how was it with you?" But from your perspective, you set boundaries, and how did that work?
Well, I think it's really the main reason that we can be who we are today as a family. Like so there would be times like, and I know this happens, and it's sometimes it's, you know, it's our intention is good, you know, so the kids are with him, or the kids are with him, and they're complaining about me. He wants to call me and be like, hey, listen, you know, this is what one of the spouses will be like, hey, you just need to know so-and-so is mad at you and they did not appreciate blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So whenever, I mean, I know that happens all the time.
Yeah, all the time. I hear that all the time.
And so one of my boundaries during that time, even though I knew it was a good intention on his part, he was trying to help me, you know, understand certain things. I literally would say, it's none of your business. Okay? My relationship with my kids, that's my responsibility and my business.
Wow, that's good.
And your relationship with the kids is your responsibility, period. And so that was a really hard boundary, but it was a hard line boundary that I created. And there were times that I knew things that I knew it would be a benefit for him if he knew. But I was like, not my business.
Yeah, not crossing that boundary.
Because here's the reality. And this is why you need to have that, what's currently happening and the big picture simultaneously. Mm-hmm. Because whether your kids are 3, 6, 8, 12, like whatever they are aware of or are not aware of in this current moment, they will become aware.
Right.
And I never wanted to be the person who made their awareness. Truth always reveals itself, period. Period. End of story. No truth needs to be revealed with my help.
Wow, that's so
and
good.
That's part of trusting the process. You know, that to trust that and keep my mouth shut, and maybe him keeping his mouth shut with me. It's just it saved us. it kind of, what is the word I'm looking for? It kind of, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but the boundaries is what helped us be able to be the family that we saw. My kids today come to me all the time, and they'll just be like, I'm so thankful that we have the divorced parents that we do, because of what they see in their friends and then in the world. Like, my kids are grateful. They see us today being more effective apart than if we were together.
And that's due to the intentionality that you both had.
100%. It goes back to, that circle and being intentional and setting those boundaries. And
yeah. All right. So to conclude up, Kim, as a life coach, how would people find you?
So I have a website, and that is sojourncoaching.com. That's SOJOURN coaching.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much for kicking off the new year. I'm so excited. And for the listeners, I hope this was really, really good. I know I've learned a lot from it. And Kim, I just thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you. I appreciate you for having me.
Occasionally, Sydney and I will be releasing Q&A bonus episodes where we will answer your questions and give you a personal shout out.
If you have a comment or question regarding anything that we discuss, email us at info@ichatmediation.com. That's info@ichatmediation.com. And stay tuned to hear your shout out and have your question answered here on the show.
For more information about my services or to schedule your mediation with me, either in person or using my iChat Mediation virtual platform built by Cisco Communications, visit me online at imediateinc.com. Call me at 561-262-9121, toll free at 877-822-1479, or email me at mbrickman@ichatmediation.com.